Good evening. I want to thank you all for being a part of listening to my speech tonight. Professor Blash, I want to introduce you to my audience. First, I have my brother, my Mimi on FaceTime, my fiance Kayla, who is recording for me, my mom, and my dad to join me and hear me present tonight this informative speech for you. To my classmates, good evening. Welcome, and I hope you enjoy this presentation. Today, I'm giving you an informative speech on why it is important to remember the Civil War and what we can learn from the mistakes that were made in the past. The Civil War is one of the darkest stains in the fabric of our nation's history. The hatred, bloodshed, and division created in this war left deep scars in our country. Yet after the war had ended, many battles against American brothers had just begun. The war of racism had not yet come close to ending. Years later, we still see this battle raging as strongly as it ever has. Today, I would like to encourage you to remember the past. I would like to provide you with some reasons to remember the good and bad of the past in order to be better prepared to make a brighter future. To begin with, I would like to highlight some of the reasons why the Civil War began in the first place. The Civil War was started between the North and the South disagreeing over a number of social, political, and economic issues, namely such as the rights of government, between the rights of the state versus the federal government, the issue of slavery, as well as some economic and trade policies. The North was in favor of preventing slavery. They wanted to see slavery abolished and see the federal government recognized as the supreme authority in the land. They also, on the other side of the coin, you see the South. The South were in favor of expanding slavery, and they believed in the right of the state to govern as they see fit. These social issues, coupled with the economic and trade issues that divided them in that day, led to creating the conflict that ultimately exploded into what was one of the bloodiest, yet at the same time most storied and studied events of our nation's history. I would like to give you some reasons to remember the Civil War and what we can learn from that event. Firstly, the reason it is important to remember the Civil War is to prevent something like it from happening again. The Civil War was a terrible event in our nation's history. It began out of division, it was motivated by hatred, and I want to highlight one particular story that somewhat summarizes the feelings of hostility towards American brothers in this time. In the town of Quitman, a small town in South Georgia, there was a story of 4 men who were arrested on conspiracy to start a slave insurrection where they would be providing the slaves weapons in an attempt to take over the town of Quitman. The men were caught, tried, and executed over this conspiracy. There was so much hatred, there was so much hostility towards one another, and they allowed this to continue to explode into what the Civil War became. The Civil War ultimately was the breaking point of conflict that went unresolved. The issues that divided the South and the North were more than just political differences of opinion. They became personal, deeply antagonistic problems that ultimately led them to resort to the violence that we saw in that historical war. Also along the same lines, it's important to remember to prevent something like it from happening again, but also to learn from the mistakes that were made then. For example, along the lines of the South and the North, I think you saw an unwillingness to work together on a number of things. Compromise is not always the wisest decision, but where compromise can be made, it is beneficial for both sides in a decision and in an important political party in order to work to the betterment of all people that are involved. As this unwillingness to work together ultimately created a linchpin in the Civil War, and then allowing hatred to build in our hearts. The issues became personal, deeply personal. It led to a hatred of their fellow man, their American brother, their own native countrymen. They began to kill and maim one another over the hatred that they had allowed to build in their hearts. And it's important to remember this mistake that was made, to learn from it and move forward. And then finally, to learn to love one another. Ultimately, where hatred is building in our hearts, love will never be. At the same time, where love is building in our hearts, hatred has no room there. It's important to remember that the Civil War was fought between two sides of people that were divided without love in their hearts for one another. Thomasville, a small town in South Georgia, became the host of a prison camp. Originally located in Andersonville, there were about 5,000 federal prisoners that were moved from Andersonville on suspicion of a potential raid in order to set them free. As they marched the prisoners from Andersonville to Thomasville to station them there for several weeks, before eventually marching them 60 miles north to Albany. In the time that these prisoners were moved from Andersonville to Thomasville and then north to Albany, many of them died as a result of diseases such as cholera, dysentery, diarrhea, and malnutrition. They were treated horribly. They were treated without love. They were not regarded as countrymen. They were not regarded as fellow human beings. They were regarded very simply as just trophies collected in battle. Where did this love go? Where did this love leave them? Jesus Christ gave a commandment in the book of John, chapter 13, verse 34, where he commands, "A new commandment that I give to you, that you love one another as I have loved you." Where this love in our heart is, we can remember to fill our hearts with love in order to avoid the hatred building and in order to avoid letting history repeat itself and make a better and brighter future, because we do remember the past. With every moment in time comes an opportunity to learn. The Civil War is no different. History stands as a monument to teach us that despite all that has happened, there is hope for the future. As we remember what hatred has done to our country in the past, let us be motivated to love one another for a great and bright future. I look forward to hearing all of your feedback and your comments, as well as looking forward to hearing your own speeches. Take care and have a great night.